in fact, to protect our elections, and that includes also having cybersecurity best practices at the levels of our communities and providing resources that are needed. So we're ready for this discussion of election interference. We say bring it on, and in fact, it would be great to answer all this endless discussion of Russian interference with a real, nonpartisan People's Commission for election integrity and to safeguard our elections against interference that looked at all aspects of potential interference and actually dealt with how we can, in fact, take simple, common sense steps to protect our elections. So it was really interesting to see a poll that came out just today. National Public Radio did this poll and actually released some of the results today in a poll that looks at, so where is the public thinking about our political system right now and our political parties, and also about the whole Russia investigation. And it's really interesting to see that faith in our political institutions and the establishment political parties is at apparently an all-time low. It's actually been in the tank for decades. In fact, this is not new. This is not a sudden matter of Russian interference in this election or the last election or anyone before that. While the powers that be would like to write off social unrest and political opposition as tools of a nefarious, evil foreign power, in fact, we need not look very far, no further than our own neoliberal political system establishment that has thrown everyday working people under the bus with endless war abroad, austerity at home, an assault on our environment, our education system, a generation lost in debt, healthcare which is absolutely unaffordable, 75% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck while the income stagnates and while the cost of living has skyrocketed. And you can say hello to Yola. They're actually here together, which is nice to see that the lion and the lamb actually have become good friends. But in fact, we're having a lot of, let me see, maybe this is hunger, and I'm just going to provide a treat here in the form of frozen peanut butter, and we'll see if we can't keep Yola busy too with that. Okay. She seems interested. So, I think it's really interesting for all the endless, mind-numbing, what should we call it, messaging, propaganda, whatever from the media, that there's no problem here, that problem is Russia. And, the incredible, support, obsessive support that they're trying to give to the political establishment, people are not buying it. That the opinion of the political establishment remains in the tank. A recent study also shows about 62% of Americans who are clamoring for an independent political party because the two major parties have basically thrown us under the bus. According to the NPR poll, I think it's something like 30% approximately support for the Democratic Party and 19% support for the Republican Party. So both are small minority enterprises at this point. And it goes a long way to explain why the political establishment is on the assault right now against the voices of democracy, the voices of political integrity and political resistance, which we are together. So again, thank you so much for that. And rest assured that in spite of what you're hearing from the big megaphones and the big media and the MSNBCs out there about, how everybody's on board and what a traitor you are if you doubt the integrity of the political establishment, if you doubt the mythology that Russia is responsible for all social unrest in this country. If you doubt that, they would like you to think that you're alone, you're a traitor. Clearly, the American people are not buying it. Because the Russiagate inquiry has gone off the rails, they are undermining their own credibility. And I just want to affirm that I believe there is an important role in these investigations into real election interference, like quid pro quo deals, which we don't have evidence of yet. Though the Mueller investigation is ongoing, it's important. It should not be politicized. It should not be sensationalized. It should not be dragged through the mud by the corporate media on both sides of the argument, but the corporate media is certainly politicizing this investigation. Quid pro quo deals, money laundering, and the like, the obstruction of justice are not okay, no matter who's doing them. And that's important. But when the other investigations, and there are 3 congressional investigations in addition to the Mueller investigation, so if you're a little confused by them, you're not alone. I think a lot of people out there are quite confused by what's actually going on. And because there's so much politicizing, it's really undermined the valid part of the investigation. Part of that politicizing, as you may know, is directed towards us, towards my campaign and myself. We were the target of a smear that was begun not after my visit to Russia or to participate in a bona fide conference where I brought a message critical of the war establishment, the U.S. war establishment and the Russian war establishment. I brought a message of peace, of international dialogue, reconciliation, of finding principles, positions on which to collaborate, like a weapons embargo to the Middle East, like a global Green New Deal, like conversion to 100% green renewable energy by 2030, like abolishing nuclear weapons. And kudos to all those who've been working on the nuclear weapons treaty that has recently been proposed by the United Nations, signed by the majority, or shall we say supported by the majority of the world's nations, who have now taken it back to their countries for signing. That's exactly what I went to this conference in Russia for. Was I attacked at the time? No, I wasn't. There was nothing secret. This was all public information. We were not only, shall we say, not making backroom moves or deals, we were a model and continue to be a model of transparency and of integrity in our dealings with people from all countries. And we were completely open and above board about the national leaders we were talking to. I did not get to talk to Putin, although he was seated briefly at the table, the head table I was at in the evening of this conference. But I did, participate in a forum during the day, which was heard broadly by Russian leaders, where I delivered those messages of peace, emergency climate action, and nuclear weapons abolition. I delivered those messages over the course of the day, especially the message of peace. And not only there in Russia, but also in Paris at the Climate Accords, where I spoke at length with the deputy chief negotiator from China. So I was also speaking with Chinese leaders, and I had the great pleasure of speaking with Caroline Lucas, the leader of the Green Party from the UK, who was also there, as well as Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, about the same agenda. And I was so uplifted to see how much support there is globally for this agenda of international law, human rights, and diplomacy. it was just so gratifying to see that there is support for this agenda, not only here in the United States, but around the world, and enormous potential to move forward. I wasn't attacked at the time. I wasn't attacked until the very embarrassing emails of the Democratic National Committee were leaked and became public information that the DNC had interfered with the election in a very big way by both assaulting Bernie Sanders and undermining his campaign, and by elevating Donald Trump through their strategy, which they referred to as the Pied Piper strategy, to elevate the truly lunatic fringe of the Republican Party, including Donald Trump, and to do their best to make him the voice of the Republican Party so that the DNC and the Clinton campaign thought they would have a better chance of beating Donald Trump in the election. No such luck, and unfortunately, we're living with the results of their election interference. So when we talk about election interference, there is no one more powerful than political operatives who interfere in the election. And after that was revealed, that's when the smear campaign began by Democratic Party operatives. The smear campaign began. That smear campaign basically continued for the past year. And on the basis of that smear campaign, I'm now being, quote, investigated by one of the congressional committees. And I am delighted to continue sharing what our campaign has been open and above board about, as we have basically set an example for transparency and integrity in our political dealings of all sorts, domestically and with foreign leaders and grassroots activists who we were also talking with on our tour in Moscow and in Paris as well. Let me again ask you to please fight censorship, fight the new algorithms on Facebook and in Google searches that attempt to suppress political resistance, and in particular attempt to suppress the voice of the peace community. Help us overcome our collective suppression by liking and sharing this conversation so that we can get the word out, even when the big internet companies are trying to fight the voice of the grassroots. I wanted to say a few words about MLK Day and about the outrage that preceded it. So as you know, Martin Luther King continues to be an absolute beacon of humanity, of integrity, of community, of peace, and I should add, of unity as well, a voice that really brings us together around our basic common human values. In contrast to that, we have the current occupants of the White House, who I think can, in no uncertain terms, be described as the opposite of Martin Luther King. Instead of a voice for humanity and unity, this is, really a voice for ignorance and bigotry. And we saw that again in Donald Trump's comments about the so-called, and pardon my French here, the shithole countries and the immigrants from those countries. And it's really important to note that this is the opposite of what Martin Luther King talks about. It really exemplifies what King referred to in his triple evils, that is the evils of militarism, materialism, extreme materialism, and racism. Or to use current day terminology, we might call it war, empire, and colonialism, and white supremacy. That's really what Martin Luther King was talking about. And when Donald Trump referred to these so-called shithole countries, it's really important to ask what got them into the shithole to start with. And this is a big, teachable moment, and a really important time to remember what it is that threw whole countries into poverty that's gone on in some cases for centuries, actually in many cases for centuries. And to look at just Haiti and El Salvador as two examples, it's really very telling. Haiti is, in fact, a beacon of hope and resistance and democracy, the only country ever to have overthrown in a revolution the regime of slavery that was at the time under the control of the French. This was, an unbelievably brutal country. Haiti was arguably the most profitable country in the New World, in North America. The amount of wealth being created by Haiti, essentially by the slaves in Haiti, was greater than all the 13 colonies put together. There's incredible wealth being produced by slaves, but at incredible cost. 1 in 3 slaves sent to Haiti was dead within 3 years. There was a Haitian slave revolt that took place in this incredibly impoverished colony, a 10-year revolt that in fact sapped the wealth and the military resources of the French. And as Americans, we owe the Haitians a great debt of gratitude, not only for their example of having overthrown slavery, long before we overcame slavery, but also because they drained French resources. It essentially backed the French into a deal with the early American colonies, whereby the French Louisiana was sold to the U.S. for better or for worse, essentially doubling the size of the country. So we owe our continental United States in very large part, for better and for worse, to the Haitians who actually made that possible. Let me say a quick word also. Well, before I leave Haiti, Haiti has played or has paid an incredible price, not only in its early slavery, but then the oppression that has taken place ever since, because it was recognized that the example of Haiti was extremely dangerous to the monopoly of the Europeans and their slave culture. So Haiti was purposefully suppressed and oppressed, and that really continues to this day. Moving quickly to El Salvador, which Donald Trump also mentioned as one of the countries that he incredibly smeared and said, we don't want your immigrants. In fact, without the migrants from El Salvador, and there are some 200,000 or 250,000 migrants who have been enabled to stay under the TPS, the Temporary Protective Status, plus another 200,000 of their families and their children. So you put that all together, it makes the contribution to the U.S. GDP of approximately $110 billion over the next 10 years. So this is no small contribution that these immigrants are making to our economy. And shame on Donald Trump for having basically said the opposite. Like so many other immigrants, the immigrants from El Salvador are an incredible source of wealth, community, culture, and prosperity across the board, across our country. And unbeknown to many people, and not covered by most of the media here, most of the immigrants from El Salvador did not come here on account of the earthquake in El Salvador. They were granted TPS status at that time, but the vast majority actually came as refugees from, guess what? The war. The Civil War, which was intensified by $5 billion worth of U.S. aid to the right-wing death squads militias and right-wing military that continued the long-term colonial oppression in El Salvador. So in El Salvador, like many other victims of colonialism, there was a long-term peasant struggle against the ruling elite. In El Salvador, it was actually 14 families, if you can believe that, 14 families from the economic elite, the landholders, who forced the vast majority of the Salvadoran people, like 90%, something like that, and there was no middle class. It was basically all peasants and 14 wealthy families who kept the country oppressed in miserable poverty, against which there were recurring revolts. There was another revolt which was triggered actually when the right wing assassinated the Archbishop Romero, the Archbishop, which helped coalesce the Civil War to overthrow these horrific oligarchs that were ruling El Salvador. And what happened was that they were actually winning the Civil War. It would have been settled had the Reagan administration not come in with their incredible military aid to the right wing. So, again, it's like, where did this immigration crisis come from? As we said throughout the campaign, the most important thing we can do to actually solve the crisis of immigration is to stop causing it in the first place. And that's what was going on, essentially, in El Salvador, forcing the migration of hundreds of thousands of people who were fleeing the very brutal violence. 75,000 Salvadorans were killed in this 10 years or so of their civil war, largely by the death squads, which were not only financed by the U.S., they were also trained by us. So it's really important, for us to connect the dots here. The dots between democracy, between peace, between austerity, between racism, and Martin Luther King pointed out, these all go together. And by bringing our movements together for peace, for democracy, for justice, to end student debt, to protect the rights of migrants, and to stop the wars that are forcing them to flee their home countries in the first place, that's where we get the critical mass and where we prevail. I want to just mention briefly one other piece of really good news. It's old news, but it's old news that's suddenly very visible again. And this is in the form of a movie which I had no idea actually what to expect. I had heard that the movie, whitewashed some of the details about the Washington Post, but that, the story was basically accurate. And I went with my family to see the Post, and it was one of the most uplifting movies I've seen in a long time. It really spoke to me because we are reliving very much the struggle that is, in that story that is told in the movie of the Post, which is essentially the real hero, in my mind, of this movie. It's not only Ben Bradley and Catherine Graham of the Post. They had a very important role to play, but all of this was enabled by Daniel Ellsberg, by the whistleblower who blew the whistle on, once again, murder, war crimes, lying, deceit on the part of, guess who? Not only the American government, but our intelligence agencies. And right now, they are smearing us if we raise questions about our intelligence agencies, which are fanning the flames of war mongering against Russia, causing members of Congress to say it's time to go to war against Russia. Well, let's see the evidence, because we've been goaded into war before. Not only, the assault on Iraq for the weapons of mass destruction, which did not exist, but back into the time of Vietnam. And, it was not only the Gulf of Tonkin so-called attack, which did not occur, that was only demonstrated, much later, decades later, in fact, by some great investigative reporting. Bob Scheer had very much to do with that, and a shout-out here to Bob Scheer and Trusted and his wonderful, courageous work and reporting that has gone on for decades. A shout out to them, and a shout out to all whistleblowers. And it was just so uplifting to see the story of a whistleblower told once again at a time when whistleblowers are being smeared right and left, when we're being told to just, shut up and listen to the authorities and what and dare to question our intelligence agencies, So we are standing up. We're standing up together. And let me just mention right now that as part of our standing up, we're standing up against this investigation of my campaign and of me as a so-called Russian tool. I'm being investigated for so-called colluding with Russia, and it takes time and resources to fight this, to actually fight the assault on our democracy. Interference with our elections is an attack on democracy. And interference with our democratic rights and our rights of political opposition and our rights to political free speech and association, an attack on that is also an attack on democracy. If you would like to lend a hand to our effort to fight for our democracy and our political freedoms, which are very much on the firing line right now, as you know well, in the many ways that we've discussed on this program, you can go to our website, jill2016.com, sign up for the email newsletter, and if you care to throw something into the hat, you can make a contribution. We are now accepting donations again because there are resources that are required in order to fight this new fight and defend democracy as we defend our campaign in this assault on political opposition and political independence and political integrity. So let me just ask you to throw something into the hat if you are able. Contributions of any amount are extremely welcome and appreciated. And let me ask you also to please like and share this conversation again to help us overcome internet censorship. And I'm going to move now to a couple of quick questions, and thank you again for tuning in and for being a part of this discussion. I feel very much uplifted by our conversation, by your comments, by your vision, which keeps me going in this fight. I think we're here as a community, and I so appreciate your being on this chat to assert our community and our ongoing support for each other. Matthew Glowacki says, tired of politics that's not for the people and only for profit, start the Green New Deal. Carla Dicklin, sorry you have to explain over and over and over again why you were in Russia in 2015. You explained it in 2016. We should all attend a peace conference once in a while. The DNC is corrupted. I don't see any reparations from that bunch of thieves. Michael Merrill, thank you, Jill Stein. I registered green. Michael Effendi, thanks, Jill, for acknowledging Haitians and the truth. Sean Thompson, Earth First Always. Doug Wilson, peace, people, planet over profits. Justin Rice, I wish you won the election. Our current leadership is a joke. John R. Nolan, imagine if America, not Europe, had to absorb the refugees from the wars we created in Syria and Libya and Iraq. John Nelson, if there's ever going to be a new third party in the U.S., this is the time. The 2018 elections should be a time to push for change, getting ready for 2020. Thank you all so much. I feel like I'm reading your script all the time. We are on the same page here. Question, Devlin Wade, typical for Pelosi and company to give Trump more warrantless spying power, don't you think? Why isn't that bigger news? Exactly. That should be huge news. And in case you haven't heard, the warrantless spying that was enabled going back to the time of George Bush, but has actually been happening even before that. It just got bigger during the Patriot Act. Well, that was just reauthorized, not only by Republicans, but also by Democrats in Congress. Not all of them. There are some principled people there, but the party, including its leadership, is not standing up. and they just reauthorized warrantless spying, and in fact made it worse and expanded the ways that we can be spied upon. So, yeah, the powers that be are not going to do this for us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. John Nelson, Dr. Stein, what?
Colorado Municipal, can you hold, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about that. How can I help you?
Who am I speaking with?
Monique.
Monique. My name's Jonathan Masters, and how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. Okay, I got just a simple question, really. It's we have a home rule city here in 100 home rule cities is protected in Colorado. And if I want to change the government, I can do it by charter, or I can do it by the Charter Commission. Can I do it by ballot initiative?
That is a question for Sam, and he is actually out right now. Would you like his voicemail?
Yeah, let's get his voicemail.
Okay, just a moment.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sam Matlin, League Executive Director. At the tone, please leave a detailed message. Thanks.
Hello, Mr. Sam. My name's Jonathan Masters. My phone number is 719-214-8544. I got just a technical, legal question for you. Essentially, you want to change the government. Do you do it by a charter convention as the local home rule charter states? Do you do it by charter commission? I read the Municipal League handout, and it said that you do it by charter commission. As the state, there's a bunch of scattered laws, but they've ordered it. So if you want to change the government, essentially you could do it one of two ways, by charter commission or charter convention. Or can you do it by just ballot measure? Can you just put it on the ballot measure and say, hey, let's get this new government going? So I'd like some clarification on that. If you could give me a call back, that would greatly appreciate it. Again, my name is Jonathan Masters. I'm a citizen of Pueblo, and my phone number is 719-214-8544. Okay. Thank you. I don't know what happened to her, but I called, and then they said that she doesn't work there anymore, and I didn't get any response. I just had some general questions regarding how do you change the form of government in Colorado? I'm under the impression, just tell me right or wrong, and then I'll shut up and listen. I'm under the impression we have a charter convention clause here in this home rule city, so either A, you got to go through a charter convention, or B, which I believe the way it's written up, that you could actually determine the charter convention for the city itself could determine for itself how they want to do it, or probably the more popularly opinion is the state statute has the charter commission set up. So the section 1-2 of our charter says you cannot change the government unless you have a charter convention, and so either A, you have a charter convention, or B, you have a charter commission. And that's it. That's the only two ways that I know that you're allowed to change the government in Colorado. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I out in right field?
No, you're playing in center field. You're right, dead center. You're all right. You're pretty smart. You did your homework, Jonathan. You're speaking. You're speaking specifically about city of Pueblo, right?
I am and I'm not. So,
okay.
We have just the section 1-2, if you could put it like that. You know what I mean? Because there is, we have a controversial that's specific to us, but just in general, if I'm in a city that has a charter convention clause, It seems to me you can only do a charter commission and a charter convention. You couldn't do it by ordinance. You couldn't do it by resolution. You'd have to do it through those legal channels.
Yeah, well, right. Okay, here's the deal.
Yeah.
So, our state constitution establishes home rule for cities, and that means in English the ability, and it's a fundamental right that is given to the citizens of any city in this state.
Okay.
And it's been that way since 1912.
Right.
We have now, out of 272 cities and towns in the state, 101 of them operate as what we call home rule cities or towns, and they operate under their own local charter, basically their own local constitution.
Right.
Pueblo was one of the very first back at the turn of the last century to adopt the charter.
Right.
Now, the Constitution generally spells this out, and then there's an enabling state law that implements some of the provisions. The only way that a charter can be adopted is by a vote of the people. The only way a charter can change is by a vote of the people. Now, a change to a charter can be proposed by initiative, and that's precisely what happened a few weeks ago when you guys voted on a question to change the form of government from the council city manager system to now what's called a mayor-council system.
Right.
And you'll no longer have a city manager. Effective, you'll have a directly elected mayor who'll run the city, effective next November, a year from now. Now, that was done by a group of citizens who initiated a change to the city's home rule charter. That's perfectly appropriate and legal. Now, if the citizens of Pueblo want to have a top-to-bottom review of the charter and look at any number of issues in the charter, then in addition to the right of initiative where you can propose your own specific change to the charter, there's a provision that establishes a review commission, a committee of citizens that is appointed. I haven't read Pueblo's charter, but typically the charter revision commissions are appointed by the city council in a particular city, and they meet and present changes to the city to consider, to the council to consider, to pass on to the voters.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how specific Pueblo's charter is.
It's not. It has nothing. It has nothing. It has nothing when it comes to charter.
The council's been given broad authority.
Yeah.
And so, if there was a desire by the council to have an overhaul of the charter itself in a variety of different ways, make all kinds of changes, then they'd have to appoint a committee of citizens, otherwise known as a charter commission, to review all of that and then make a report back to the council, and then the council has to figure out what it wants to do. In this particular case that you guys voted on a few weeks ago, this was one change specific to the governance structure of the city, and the voters approved it. Now, what happens next is another story altogether. More than you ever wanted to know. I apologize.
No, keep going, God. This is absolutely brilliant stuff. So what you said, what happens now? So keep going.
Well, what happens? You mean what happens now in Pueblo with the new?
Yeah, because you said that's anybody's story, so they can either adopt the changes or not.
$64,000 question. Already there, I've read the proposed changes to the charter, and I know the folks who were involved in the changes to the charter because they spoke to me when they were drafting this, and I've presented to the council itself many times on this topic as well as others. Well, there's no clear implementation plan spelled out in these charter changes, and I am going to be very interested to see how the council proceeds.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the most recent time this happened was down in Colorado Springs, where they had a similar switch to the mayor-council system from the city manager system. And I'm not getting into whether it's right or wrong. That's not my business. I don't live in Pueblo. And so, it passed. But the transition that went on in Colorado Springs was really sloppy, and it was bumpy, and it didn't get off the ground real well. All right, this council now has about a year to figure out basically a transition plan to a new structure, a new organizational structure. Yeah. What the council's plans will be, your guess is better than mine. You live down there.
Yeah. My guess would be.
But they got to have a plan. They got to have a plan, and they've got to start talking about it.
The common sense way, it seems like the way.
Answer.
Good answer. Thank you for the answer. The common sense way, it seems like to me, just as you were speaking, is the small changes I think would probably go into effect immediately, and then the mayoral changes would go into effect upon the election of a mayor. Now, I wanted to. What do you think? Is that good, bad? Do you think it's a good analysis?
No, wait a minute. You broke up a little bit, so just repeat what you just said to me, Jonathan.
Okay, I was just saying my guess for how this thing transitions, because there's some minor changes. There was something about the immunity clause and the ordinances instead of resolution by the aviation department. So I think those will go into effect immediately, the kind of the minor little changes, and then the mayoral, there were 70 changes, 70 proposed changes, 21 pages.
I know.
And and so the majority of them is just changing the city manager to mayor, and so I would assume that the majority of those changes would sort of be activated upon the election of the mayor.
Well, that's an excellent assumption. The city attorney's office is going to have to provide some legal guidance to the council on all of that. So that's a fair assumption. I don't want to say that that's absolutely what's going to happen.
It seems like it would be the middle of the road approach.
But that's a fair assumption.
Now, I wanted to ask you a question regarding the legality of it, okay? So I don't know how much you know about me and what I'm up to.
I don't, but I'm about to find out.
You are. I filed a permanent injunction against this thing, declaring it unconstitutional before the election went down, about 12 days before the election went down. I'm actually working on the answer and response to it right now. Because I personally think that the Section 1, 2, I guess here's the legal question that I see, and just tell me if it makes sense or if I'm crazy. So the distinction that I see is if you can propose a bunch of amendments and a bunch of little changes, but you can't change the entire government. You can't change. So I feel like it's the difference between an amendment versus a change of government. And if it's a change of government, I believe that it goes against our charter. So I think it's just about a magnitude. It's about scale. Did we just change a little law here or there, or did we change, because we changed 3 branches of government? So I feel like that's amazing. Like the exact word is, we are council, manager, form of government, so it designates that's what we are, and if we want to change it, it must be by charter convention and the qualified voters, the majority, elected by the majority of the qualified voters. So that's the third sentence. It's the very top of it. It's so clear. It couldn't be more clearly expressed, and it's, like you just said, the state protects our charter, so therefore it's constitutionally protected. That is, Section 1-2 is constitutionally protected. And I think that overrules the state statute that he responded to it. And he just, I don't know if he's given me his B-level arguments just in his response, but his one...
Who are you talking about?
Dan Kagowsek, the city attorney. So
Kagowsek, Dan.
Yes, sir.
No, I don't... Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In his response, he just put He just put one little state statute and said that that's the reason that he was allowed to do this. And I feel like that is a very weak legal argument. If that's all he's got, then I don't know. I feel confident about it.
Well, you know, I haven't read Pueblo's charter in a long time to intelligently comment on it. Do you have an attorney that you retained to
No,
all this stuff forward?
it's just me. I'm just cowboying this thing. But I was just asking you about the scale. Does that...
Well, cowboys ride off into the sunset unless they got a good lawyer.
Do you have a lawyer?
You know, I don't know whether you do or not. I see what you're asking. I don't know. You know, a judge is going to look at this perhaps and say, well, but I know it, but the voters have spoken, and you know, can they make a change to the charter even if it switches from one type of governance model to another type of governance model? I don't know. I think it's an interesting argument. I
wasn't asking about the
Colorado Springs, and that's the only place where it's happened recently, where they did similar to what Pueblo did. So, you know, I won't deny the fact that there are a lot of changes in this charter, and I am dubious that most people down in Pueblo bothered to take the time to read
I'm the only one.
Details.
I'm the only one.
And, you know, this is what happens when you amend the local constitution. That's what a charter is. And, well, I guess I'll read about you in the funny papers. How long have you lived down in Pueblo?
I've been here 9 months. I moved over here from Kentucky. I was in Fowler for a couple months and then planted here.
It's a great city. It's a great community. This is just...
it's got its pros and cons. I wasn't asking you about my case. I was just asking you about the very specific, about the scale.
Well,
does the scale make sense? Like if you just amend 1 or 2 laws, yeah, clearly that's legal.
Yeah, you're raising an interesting point. And I don't know.
Can I ask you?
I've seen this happen too often where in Colorado where a city like Pueblo has gone from one type of structure to a totally different type of structure.
Yeah.
And the only other time recently, as I say, where it's happened is in Colorado Springs. So I don't know.
Can I ask you one more question?
I don't know, John.
That's fine, thank you. That's fine. I'd rather you tell me if you didn't know instead of telling me something, you know. One more question.
Yeah.
I swear this is it. Thank you, by the way, for calling me back.
Well, sure.
I guess the other part is not just scale that it boils down to, but it's can you put an unconstitutional ballot measure on the ballot. So if I was to build a concentration camp, if I had a proposal for Jewish people, can I put that on there? So I think on its face it's or ban free speech. Could I put something that's on its face illegal, and if the people choose it, then I mean, are we allowed to put, I guess, a blatantly unconstitutional ballot on the general ballot?
Well, you have asked a very interesting question.
Thank you.
Because in 1992,
yeah,
we had the initiative process in Colorado as it relates both to amending home rule charters and also as it amends the state constitution. And in 1992, there was an amendment that was approved by the voters across the state of Colorado called Amendment 2. And it basically attempted to place in the Constitution some restrictions on sexual preference, on gay marriages, and some other things, and it was approved.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, however, there were a group of individuals who challenged that language as violating the federal equal protection clause of the Constitution. And this matter went all the way up the United States Supreme Court, and in an extremely important case, the Supreme Court of the United States struck the measure down as violating the Equal Protection Clause of the federal Constitution. So, because the voters approve something doesn't necessarily make it so. But, as in all things, as it relates to the constitutionality of something, it has to be challenged. And in this case, it was, and it took quite a while to wind up before the Supreme Court of the United States, but it did, and they struck the language. So, you've asked a good question, because it's happened.
Yeah.
But it's complicated, it's lengthy, it's takes a lot of time.
I'm a policy nerd, so this is my domain.
So, that's a story on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. It gives me a direction to go, at least in my research.
Well, listen, I'll read about you in the funny papers.
Okay, I hope so. I hope they cover it. Nobody said anything about it yet.
Well, I'll see what happens here. I think what I would do if I were in your shoes at this juncture.
Yeah.
The council, the new members of the council will take office in January. They'll elect a new president of the city council, and wait till that settles down, and see how they start to discuss a transition plan and what they intend to do first, before you jump in the deep end. Because that's a question I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I think I have an answer. I feel like I want Pueblo City Council to do this process correctly. I'm not against a popularly elected mayor, so why not just have a charter convention? We were supposed to have one. Why not just do it? So I feel like I'm going to push this thing as far as I can push it up until the moment when they say, we're going to punch your face, or we'll do the charter convention as is. Because I think that I have a lot of good ideas, and if I had been asked about this, I got here in February, and they put this thing on in June, but I have a lot of good ideas. And then how many other people? It was decided in the Chamber of Commerce, like the offices of the Chamber of Commerce. So I just feel like having 9 to 21 delegates around the city deciding this, writing this up, and then putting the charter to the people, I don't know. I like that. I like the idea of that, and that's sort of what I'm going for.
Well, Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Good luck to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answering all my questions. And call me. I don't know if you just read the funny papers and you're like, you know what, I really want to tell him this. Give me a call, too.
You betcha.
All right, my man. Have a good night.
And listen, happy holidays to you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Good luck to you.
All right, my man. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, this is Diane.
Yeah, hey, Diane. My name's Jonathan Masters. I'm a Pueblo voter and fan, and type a lot on Facebook. So I have just a couple questions. I'm actually kind of dazed right now that you answered. So,
well, that's one of my MOs. I answer, and if I'm not available in a meeting or something, then I call the person back. That's my job.
God, I like that. And sometimes when you talk to the politicians that have been in office, it's almost like you're a burden to them. So it's nice to hear.
No, you're why I'm doing this. You and all the people at B3. I was a state representative for 5 years, and I really prided myself on getting back to people. Before that, I was county commissioner for 2 terms, 6 years. And again, I sort of earned that reputation. And people are often surprised, which is really a shame. It's really an interesting comment on our political system, that people expect their elected servants, and that's what we are, to not call them back. So, of course.
No, that's awesome. It tells me that you got principles too. So that's one of your rules, that you always, respond to people. So that's That's good to hear. I just had 2 quick questions for you. I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to, call you throughout the campaign.
Sure. And have you been on my website? My website has a lot of info on it.
Yeah, I've read a bunch
cool.
up on you. So I looked at your policy platform for the state, and then what your ideas are for for the district, for the nation, and and I like what I'm seeing. You seem to me like I don't know how to say this nicely, but basically like an older hippie. You're like from the 60s. I feel like you're a flower child. I don't know if that's just
it's funny. I mean, that's the era in which I grew up. But I've always been kind of a hardcore studious person.
Yeah.
So I never was a quote-unquote hippie. I was so busy, getting my straight A's, and then I always volunteered in the community, feeling that I had to use my experience, my expertise, my ability to evaluate policies to help groups, whether it was women's groups, workers' groups, environmental groups, and then, of course, ranching and farming groups. I've lived in Steamboat Springs 41 years, and I've worked with ranchers and farmers basically since the 80s. So, yeah, I've worked as a volunteer for a lot of different groups.
That's all right. You don't have to call yourself a hippie, but I guess, what about like the principles of freedom, justice, love, peace? Do you agree with those?
Exactly.
That's essentially what I associate when I say hippie. That's what I think of when I think of.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. For me, my favorite verse in the New Testament is from Corinthians. Faith, hope, love, these 3 abide, but the greatest of these is love. And I base, my policy making and my MO as a public servant on that, and that enables me, to really earn the trust of both my constituents, but also fellow legislators. And to be effective, people have to trust you.
Yeah.
And, people don't trust you unless you give them a very good set of reasons to trust me. And I think I have. I keep my promises. I never promise the moon and stars the way a certain presidential candidate did, and then failed to deliver and did the opposite.
I got a million questions for you. I hate to just kind of cut you off because I just want to direct it just 2 questions I got. Jeff Sessions had said something about marijuana, and then Palestine. I want to know your feelings about Israel-Palestine. So Jeff Sessions said that he rescinded some memo or something, and it's essentially saying open the gates for the federal agencies to start, I guess, knocking down grandma's front door and hauling her off to jail.
Who told you that?
Well, it's Jeff Sessions. He had said that he rescinded the memo, and so he's not going to honor Obama's era policies.
Oh, yes, I've been following it very closely. I believe it's an issue of states' rights. Our state, the citizens of our state, voted for medical marijuana and for recreational marijuana ever since I was in the House, all the way from every year, 2016 to 2017. We've put into place some really sensible, common sense regulations, especially focusing on keeping marijuana, away from kids.
Right.
And Jeff Sessions is just a pure ideologue. He doesn't understand the importance of this industry for jobs and for revenue in our state.
Well, for freedom too. So is it safe to say that you would protect the marijuana industry in Colorado?
Yes. Oh, yes. I have. I've never sponsored a bill on that issue, but we've had some very good bills sponsored by others that I co-sponsored.
Right.
In the Colorado House.
You've been writing the laws. You're making history. You're actually legendary, right?
What's that?
No, I'm sorry. I'm blushing over here. You've been writing laws. You were there with the marijuana transition. It's only been legal for 5 years. You've been in the legislature for 4, so you've been writing the laws.
5.
That's essentially...
all 5.
Oh, okay.
2013 to 2017. And there were some very tricky issues, and we had to keep rewriting legislation to get it right. And Sessions' memo, knocks that all down. And it's interesting that in Colorado we've gotten bipartisan agreement that we need to get rid of the session memo.
Right.
And make sure.
For the most part, I wonder about your opponent's opposition to it. If you go back 2 years ago, during Obama, he wouldn't vote for a medical marijuana bill for veterans, and then he seems kind of tepid. I mean, a lot of these Republicans, I don't know, another guy, he was another representative, he was totally against it, but as soon as the people voted for it, then he was like, gung-ho about it. But I guess I just don't feel that same enthusiasm with Tipton.
No. Well, the thing is, Tipton doesn't listen to us. And he doesn't know about the issues we face. He never has. Well, let's count Commissioner from 2007 to 2012 up here in Rock County.
Yeah.
We didn't need him to come visit us,
Right.
Because we wanted to share with him, we wanted him to report to us. He never, ever came. Not once. I'm sorry, that's your job.
It is, yeah. The other thing I was wanting to know about was maybe your ideas on peace, if you don't have a good answer with Palestine-Israel, but if you thought about Israel-Palestine, I was curious what your thoughts on...
Well, I thought a lot about it. The problem is I don't know enough. I know the very basics, and everything this administration has done since, January 20th, 2017, has made it worse. I mean, you don't stick it in somebody's face diplomatically. I mean, that's just common sense. And you try to meet with all the leaders. Now, granted, that's primarily the executive branch responsibility, but I think where there's bills in the House, U.S. House.
Would you be in favor of the two-state solution?
Yeah, I think a two-state solution is probably, given, again, what I've read over the years, and no, it's not. I think that makes a lot more sense. But I think now with these recent presidential proclamations and moves, that's farther away. We can fix it, I think. We can come back and negotiate with good trust with everybody.
I was actually reading some of Tipton's old comments about this, and when Obama, he was criticizing Obama for, essentially, he was kind of saying he was picking sides. That he wanted to go back to the 67 borders, and Scott Tipton thought that that he was picking sides. So he thought that it was unfair if we want a two-state, a fair solution between the two parties to pick one side or another, and then with him declaring, Trump declaring Jerusalem the capital, then that's essentially picking a side. So I don't know. I feel like those two issues, he's kind of talking out of both ends of his mouth, and I'd like to kind of pin him down on where he actually stands with those two issues.
That's a great idea. Could you send me links to the stuff you were reading?
Yeah, I can. You got what's a good email for you?
Yeah, it's Diane, D-I-A-N-E.
Yeah.
Diane, D-I-A-N-E, for Colorado spelled out .com. So it's Diane at DianeForColorado.com.
F-O-R?
F-O-R, yep.
Yep, okay, I got you. Yeah, I'll send it. I just kind of run my mouth on Facebook and YouTube, and I'm super progressive, so I'm just kind of paying attention. There's a lot of things going on right now in Colorado. You got all the representative races, but you got the governor's race, and then you got all these county races too, the assessor and the sheriff, and so there's a lot to talk about this year.
Well, and I hope that fact is going to bring a lot of people out to vote, because in 2016, in our congressional district, 16-3, the Republicans had a 9-point turnout advantage, and we've got to have a 9-point turnout advantage.
I don't feel like we're actually at a huge deficit as a lot of people are saying it's safely Republican. He only won like 56, 53, 50%. So I know it was like maybe 7 points or so, but it was still it's beatable. He's not that strong, and I can't imagine him being that charismatic. I feel like he's just kind of a generic rank and file Republican who's probably a nice guy. That's probably what I think he's. I'm a nice guy is probably the biggest his only selling point. Hey, look at me, I'm nice. But his policies are atrocious. So
yeah. Well, he's a puppet. I mean, he does whatever Paul Ryan says. He does whatever Donald Trump says, and more importantly, he does whatever the mega donors say.
What about the mega donors? Do you know about the interest, the SG interest group?
Oh yeah. That whole situation has been just so negative and so, again, unethical. I mean, he had them write him a bill. He didn't write, his staff didn't write the damn bill. It didn't go anywhere, thank God.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's still writing for them, and he's taking their money, so you definitely know who his master is, right? Like you were saying, he's a Ryan puppet, but I would say he's more of that SG interest group, so it's 4 guys out of Texas. He cares more about what 4 guys out of Texas is saying than the general population.
Well, he doesn't understand the struggles we face in the third CD. He doesn't understand the economic issues. He comes from a fairly affluent family in Cortez, and, young types, but he's a small businessman, which technically he is, but he's never had to struggle the way so many people in his district are currently struggling. He just doesn't get it. I mean, if I were your representative and they delayed that ship boat, the child health insurance program boat, that's unconscionable. They knew that September 30th was the end of the fiscal year,
Yeah.
and that they had to vote on them.
Right, well,
responsibility.
he read on his webpage, he was kind of giving lip service about, hey, S-chip, we need to protect S-chip, which I thought was kind of surprising to me. But, like you said, essentially that's the Republican MO, right? Take care of yourself.
Right. And so it's like, if he really cared about it, he would have fought for it.
Right.
I mean, and he hasn't said a word about Trump's budget and about these incredibly large cuts in programs that help working people in our district, whether it's Pell Grants for young people, apprenticeship programs. He talks a big talk about opioid abuse and how to prevent and treat it. Well, excuse me, that takes money. So if you don't want to put the money where your mouth is, you talk all you want, but these things don't just happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's actually incredible to me that healthcare is still debated universal, in industrialized nations. I mean, everybody still has it, and if you were to go around kitchen table issues, I would say jobs, education, and healthcare. That's one of the main the holy trio or whatever. But I feel like that's one of the main. Healthcare is life. And if you're not for my health, you're not for my life. I can't really listen to anything else you're saying.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. Do you get my emails? Are you on my email list?
No, I haven't. How do I get your emails?
Just go to my website and you can sign up there.
Okay.
And then the person that email will go to the person that adds people to the email list.
Have you got any debates with, is there only one person running against you, the Democratic?
There's another guy, he's a very nice man. He was recruited to run by some very wealthy donors of an Aspen who didn't believe a woman could win.
Interesting.
He's very nice, but he's never been in elected office. He's never won an election.
Well, there was 2 guys. One, they said that he didn't. I forget. One dropped out, or one was still in.
Yeah.
Or?
One dropped out. Chris Kennedy from Grand Junction dropped out, and this is Carl Hamlin from Carbondale, which is up in the Roaring Fork Valley, Pleasant Valley. But he describes himself as a centrist. I have no idea what that means. He hasn't taken a stand on some of the issues, and I'm sure as things develop, he'll take a stand. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. With ideas, I believe ideas are a currency in a democracy. So they don't say anything. I mean, platforms. I'm kind of a policy nerd. So I feel like I like you. Everything that you're saying, I like that you're approachable. I could talk to you. You talking about Rachel or the Silent Spring, and you were talking about Bobby Kennedy and a whole bunch of stuff. I just,
Well, those are books and people influenced by life. And I think the voters need to know.
Minnesota. You graduated Minnesota.
Historically or whatever.
So what would you consider yourself then? If not a hippie, are you like a good balance? Are you like a socialist capitalist? Or are you what would you call yourself?
I'm a Democrat.
Okay.
What I mean by that is that government should be for all the people, not just some, and that right now it's just for some. And we've got to change that. We need to invest in our people. We need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to protect the environment.
Right.
We need to make sure that our communities can thrive. I mean, I don't care much for labels, really. That's why I was surprised that my Democratic opponent described himself as a centrist. I mean, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to suggest I'm a radical. Well, I'm radical on some things, not so radical on other things.
I like that you're a radical. So I feel like him running to the right. I don't like that. I feel like you got the independents to go after. So I feel like running after the right is just running after those Republican voters, and I'm sure you need those too. But I feel like the independents and the progressives is such a wider base, and then non-voters, the people who don't vote, is probably the biggest untapped market. If somehow you could get like a big machine to register everybody. It's so easy here. God, online register, and then in Pueblo we get mail ballots. I don't know if that's the same all the way throughout the whole state. Okay, that's amazing. To not vote in Colorado, it's like you really have to fight it off. You really have to be like no, I don't want to. No, I will never vote. It's like, God, okay, calm down. I didn't know you hated voting that much.
Right. Well, I need to go pretty quick here.
Yeah.
But please stay in touch. Send me emails. And then if you could send me any of that info you have on the Middle East, that would be great.
And if I can call you from time to time, that'd be nice too.
Yeah.
Cool, Diane. Thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate it, Jonathan.
Yeah. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Let's stay in touch.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Super nice.
Congressman Tipton's office. This is Brian.
Hey Ryan, is Mr. Tipton around?
He's in Washington, D.C. What can I do for you?
He's in there fighting for all the rest of us. I'm a citizen, Pueblo, just curious about his stance on what Jeff Sessions said about marijuana.
He said that, which I had that Stein paper a few days ago about it. Yeah, let me find it. I'll read it to you directly.
Okay, cool. That's the safest way for you.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's on our website.
And the reason, I think I heard him paid lip service. I saw him kind of just mentioning a lineup, but I don't know his actual feelings with marijuana. And being in Colorado, there was another article I'd read last year, 2 years ago, about him not voting for veterans, medical marijuana. So I was just kind of, I was wanting to get the feeling what his stance is for. I want the marijuana industry to be protected. So I guess I wanted to get the.
Yeah. Basically, he feels that, this is a state issue, and then when Sessions was up for his confirmation hearings, he said that he was going to keep his hands off of it. Now with the new Sessions memo, that kind of goes against what he said, so he's said this is a state issue, you need to stay out of it.
So he will protect the marijuana industry in Colorado?
Yeah.
What was that deal with the veterans thing? Was that just because it was the Obama and the Democrats put it forth or something, or how come?
I don't know what that was. I don't remember that at all. Do you have more information on it?
No, just if you Google medical marijuana veterans Scott Tipton, it'll pull up.
All right, let me find it and see what it is.
I guess I could pull it up too.
Oh yeah, this was let me see what it is here. I think I found it.
It was from cannabis, but they had quoted a Denver paper.
Yeah, I'm reading through it right now. Give me a sec.
Okay.
what it's talking about was a letter that was signed by representatives. It was just one that he didn't sign on to. It didn't, like, there wasn't a vote to protect medical marijuana for veterans or anything like that. It was just a letter urging them to keep up a provision, which is still there anyway.
And so he may, you're saying perhaps he never got, he never heard of it, he never got wind of it, or?
Yeah, that could be that, or sometimes with the letters when they sign on to them, it's not like a bill or anything. It just urges it, and there's thousands of those.
There was another Republican, Buck, Mr. Buck, I think, Ken Buck. He was opposed to Amendment 64, like, vehemently, like, you know, like, but then as soon as the people had passed it, now he's like one of their main champions. So is that close to Scott Tipton's view, or?
Yeah. I think pretty much the entire delegation for Colorado has that same view.
In spite of their past being on the wrong side of history views?
Yeah. And with Scott Tipton, it was, you know, he said this is left up to the state. This is what the state wants. The feds have no right butting into this or receiving this. It's a states' right issue.
And he'll fight for...
He may not agree with it, but as far as he's concerned, politically and legislatively, no, like, this is what Colorado wants.
Cool. And I can call you up anytime if I have any questions about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to call me or you can email me too. Sometimes it's easier for me to get a direct answer to you if you email. That way I can.
Yeah. What's your email address?
It's Brian, BRIAN, .McCain, MCCAIN, at mail, MAIL, .house, HOUSE, .gov, GOV.
Oh, look at that. It's fancy. All right, cool, Mr. McCain. I appreciate you answering my questions today.
Yeah, like I said, any questions you have, feel free to call or email. And then, as far as marijuana goes, he believes this is a states' right issue, and possession is basically going back on what he promised when he was appointed. And I know on the Senate side, because they control the appointments and stuff, and if you're watching Cory Gardner, he's holding all judicial Justice Department nominees until this is fixed. It goes back to what it was.
Cool.
On the House side, we have nothing to do with that part of it. We can just give our opinion, put stuff out there, unless there's like a legalize it federal bill that's going to come across, which I doubt will happen anytime soon.
But I guess your diplomatic answer is okay with me. Essentially, he's for it, states' rights, and that's cool. I would like to hear some passion out of him. I don't know if you talk to him much or whatever, but if he could just be like, you know what, I might not be in agreement with it, but we did it, and it's been working, and we're going to keep going with it. You know, just a little bit of enthusiasm, a little quotable. You know, to read a quote next to his name instead of just a list of names.
Yeah, and like I said, there was if you go into Chieftain, and I think it was last week when this all broke, we had a pretty good quote in there, 2 paragraphs saying, actually ours was one of the more aggressive ones out of all the delegates.
Okay. No, I have to go check that out then.
Yeah, look at it in the Chieftain, and he basically said, hey bro, step off, man. So.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mr. McCain. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Hello, you've reached the desk of Ross Herzog. I'm currently unavailable, but please leave your name, telephone number, and a brief message, and I'll call you right back. Talk to you later. Bye now.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or hold for more options.
Yeah, hey, Ross, I was just curious about your instant runoff voting mechanisms. You're one of the few cities in Colorado that has instant runoff voting, and I was wondering how it was working out for you all. So if you have some time and don't mind answering a couple questions, Give me a call. My name's Jonathan Masters, 719-214-8544. All right. Thank you.